Hello everybody, Nick here, and welcome to the third part of my 13th Doctor, Jodie Whittaker, Christian era reflection, where I discuss the episodes and series of the 13th Doctor's era leading up to and after the Centenary Special. So everything beforehand will be discussed leading up to, and then the Centenary Special, plus maybe a bonus video on the redacted audio series on BBC Sounds, will be discussed afterwards, along with a conclusion of my thoughts on the era. So previously, Part 0 was the introduction and Twice Upon a Time. Part 1 covered Series 11 and Revolution. That one, Revolution of the Daleks, and Series 12 was covered in Part 2. And now we're on Part 3, which is Series 13, aka Flux, as well as the first two 2022 specials, Eve of the Daleks and Legend of the Sea Devils, with the Centenary Special, The Power of the Doctor, being dealt with next time after the episode has aired. As like I said, these first couple ones are pre-Centenary Special, and the others are post. So, without further ado, Series 13 and this DVD is in placement of that upcoming Centenary Specials, 2022 Specials Steelbook. So, placeholder for those. So, Series 13, Flux. The first full-length story of a series since Trial of a Time Lord. Not story arc, actual stories. This is a 6-part story. Like Trial of a Time Lord was a 14-part story. So, it's a whole story, and Torchwood, Children of Earth, and Miracle Day were 5 and 10 parts, respectively. Though the latter definitely had individual titles for that one, as opposed to Part 1, Part 2, or Children of Earth's case, Day 1, Day 2, etc. So, in this one's case, you got Chapter something and then its own title as well. So, Chapter 1, The Halloween Apocalypse, for example. So, yes, you can talk about each episode on their own, as well as a whole story, just like Trial of a Time Lord segments. The first story, the second one, etc. First 4 parts were Mysterious Planet. Second 2, the second 4 parts were Mind Warp, etc. So that's what we'll kind of do. We'll talk about each episode on their own, and then kind of say how it works as a story, as a whole story, at the end, and then go on to the 2 specials. So, and then overall, of the series overall at the end, as per usual. So, starting off episode 1. Now, at the time again, this was my favourite series of the Whittaker era. This was after Series 12 went down in opinion. So Series 11 was my preferred of the 2 series prior to this, after the revisitations. And then this aired. This is the first of the 3 series I've not revisited, done revisitation reviews for. I only did that for Series 11 and 12, and Series 10 for the Capaldi era, because I'd done ones at the time of seeing them, and then came back to them again later on as part of the marathon, as previously mentioned. So Series 13 was the first series post-marathon, and doing all the reviews from An Unearthly Child to Revolution of the Daleks revisitation. So this is the first one after that. Halloween Apocalypse is the first episode after that. And this is the first series, so maybe they'll get revisitation reviews down the line, but as of right now, this is how it stands. Halloween Apocalypse was a pretty good start at the time. I enjoyed it, had a pretty good time. It was mostly set up, understood that, fair enough. Some decent stuff happening in there, some characters introduced, fair enough, some exciting stuff. Looking back on it now, the stuff it introduces and sets up, still fine, but I think some of the stuff could have been explained more, like the, for instance, why is Azure in the North Pole? And why is she disguised as human? And who's that guy she's sleeping with? Is he like Lee from Fugitive of the Jadoon? Like, he's just assigned to this person, this job? And, why does Carvanita try to kill the Doctor? I know he doesn't want to talk to her about the whole stuff with Division, but why does he try to kill her? And then they kind of end up being such buddies later on. Maybe a bit reluctant, but they end up being a bit buddy-ish. And the whole angel tapping into Claire's head, apparently, she knows the Doctor and Yaz, not from what is hinted at of them meeting her in her past, but it's their future. But actually, it's apparently, the angel told her about them. It's one or the other. Make your mind up. And yeah, it's a very setty-uppy story. but it's still quite fun, enjoyable. It's good. It's all right. It's enjoyable. Unfortunately, things aren't that great later on. But before that, we got War of the Sontarans, which is brilliant. This is a great episode. Um, really enjoyed this one. Once again, historicals are the strongest stories of this era, bar the Witchfinder's ending being the exception of the rule, and a couple of other great stories that are not historicals or include historical elements, like Spyfall Part 2 and Survivors of the Flux include historical elements from what I mean. Oh, and Legend of the Sea Devils is also the exception of the rule, but more on that later. Okay, so but Water Sontarans is a great story. The Doctor is trapped in the Crimean War and had to work with Mary Seacole to stop the Sontarans who have invaded the Crimean War, and they're using the Flux, this space-time event that was introduced in the last episode, which is given Azure and Swarm, these Ravager creatures, the main villains, a chance to escape and wreak havoc on the universe. So and it's also allowing other creatures like the Sontarans to do stuff like invade time and basically try to take over Earth as a big strong point in using time to conquer all of Earth's history, which is really clever. This is a pretty clever story and pretty fun and enjoyable. And the Sontarans are totally in character. After being a bit of a joke, I mean, the rules are a bit of a joke, but after being even more of a joke, after Strax, I mean, fair enough, it's just him. But then other Sontarans have kind of made a bit of a joke in the Moffat era. So, yeah, after that, and it's good to go back to being a bit more of a serious take on the Sontarans, while still keeping that bit of a campiness to them, because they're still quite silly creatures. But we're back to being totally in character for them, back to the classic characterizations and classic series characterizations of the characters, specifically the Third Doctor, early Fourth Doctor era ones, and whilst also keeping some of the elements from the series 4 two-parter they came back in, Sontaran Strategy and Poison Sky. So it's elements of the third, early fourth, and 10th Doctor eras are being included here, and we're avoiding some of the campiest stuff from the 11th and 12th, and also some of the less good Sontaran moments from the later 4th and 6th Doctor's eras. And yeah, they're really great foes in this story, great threat, and pretty damn good take on the Sontarans really here. I really enjoyed it. Extra points for having Dan Starkey come back as well, of course. And the new actor playing the leader guy, Sontarans, is also brilliant. Some great stuff there. There is this character that I like, but ultimately he's not as some other characters. And if you know me, those characters are ones I'm not really fond of. Chancellor Autumn from Dr. Peloton. But at least this one's not so bad, and he only has a couple minutes of that. We've also got this odd subplot with Yaz having to help at this temple thing, which ties into the next episode, which actually works in really well. I actually enjoyed how that subplot was worked into the plot, but we mostly focused on the Doctor and Dan's stuff. Dan's in the present day and he's having to sort out some sort of stuff there. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention Dan. He was introduced in the Halloween Apocalypse and played by John Bishop. Oh yeah, and all these episodes are written by Chris Chibnall, with Maxine Alderton co-writing Village of the Angels and Ella Rhodes co-writing Legend of the Sea Devils. So now that's out of the way. But yeah, Dan played by John Bishop, who's the second best character in this era after Graham O'Brien, and Carvanista, who's the third best character in this era, played by Craig Elms. And yes, I know he looks a bit silly, like a human dog person, but this is Doctor Who. I mean, they don't always have to be serious creatures. They can just look like a humanoid dog man. We've had humanoid cat people, why not? And I know some people like Harry Thomas have said it's a bit silly. Yeah, but I think it would be even more silly if it was the classic series where they had less of a budget. At least they're gonna make it look realistic with a bit of fantasy, but realistic anyway. And it's good. It's good makeup effects and makeup and the mask and stuff. But Carvanista actually looks pretty damn good for a dog person. So yeah, he's great and he's really fun and enjoyable. Actually, yeah, he's really great. I love him. He Dan and Carver needs to get the biggest loss in this series, just like Graham used to do in the previous two. Such a good double act in this series. Carver needs to should have stayed on as a companion. I'm calling it here. Anyway, episodes. Funny enough, the odd-numbered episodes are slightly longer than the even ones. Episodes 1, 3, and 5 are the traditional 50 minutes, but episodes 2 and 6 are hour long, and episode 4 is about 55 minutes, meaning that this series is truly 6 hours long. Actually, it makes it 5.5. Sorry, not 6 hours. It makes it 5.5 hours, meaning this story is longer than the Daleks Master Plan, or joint as long as Daleks Master Plan if you include Mission to the Unknown, and also longer than Children of Earth, but it's shorter than The Trial of a Time Lord and Miracle Day. Episode 3, Once Upon Time, is the one at the time. This was my least favorite, and I think I still ranked it lowest on the ranking back in December, January. I think this one was a bit of a all over the place, but I do think some of the stuff was handled well. Some of the stories, Yaz and Dan are the weakest, but I think learning about Vinder's backstory, Vinder played by Jacob Anderson, was pretty interesting, and he's a major player in this series. Not so much episode 4, but the other episodes, yes. And yeah, he's a pretty fun character. Really like him, enjoyable, and it's good to learn a bit more about him and how that's tying in with stuff, especially as we're introduced to his love interest, Belle, and his nemesis, the Grand Serpent. I can't remember the actress's name for Belle, but the Grand Serpent is played by Craig Elm? No, that's not right. Craig Parkinson. Yeah, Craig Parkinson. Who's a pretty slimy villain in this series. Although why he's even here outside of Vinder's backstory, I don't know. But yeah, so we've got some interesting stuff here, and we've got the return of the fugitive Doctor, and apparently Carver needs to travel with her, or work with her at least, part of the division. And yeah, some interesting stuff here with them. And Belle, whilst at the first viewing it was a bit odd, having these extra stories, it felt like another Brendan situation half the time. I was really worried that was going to be the case, but ultimately it actually turned out to have a tie-in with Vinder, his love interest, and carrying his child. And she has some pretty cool action scenes as well with the Cybermen and some good stuff too. So once the episode's over and you know what's the deal with this character, it actually makes a lot more sense. So those watching this one for the first time, if they're if they're not really sure about it until the ending, I completely understand that. But hopefully on the second or later viewings, it makes a bit more sense. The Yaz and Dan stuff aren't really as important. Dan's kind of ties in with his character development, but Yaz is not so much. It mainly sets up the stuff for episode 4 with the Weeping Angels. There's not really much more to say about this episode apart from the fact that it's more fugitive Doctor stuff. Jo Martin's back and she's great. I think the characters developed slightly more, but it would have been nice to see more of the fugitive Doctor actually doing stuff as opposed to cutting back and forth between her and 13. It's stable in one situation, it can be stable in the other. That and Swarm and Azure are great villains. But remember what happened to the last great villain, which was undermined. Stay tuned. So, next episode is Village of the Angels, which is my favourite episode of the series, though War of the Sontarans is a close second, and they are my 5th and 4th favourite episodes, individual episodes of the era so far, after Demons of the Punjab, Rosa, and Haunting of Villa Diodati in the previous 2 series. And we've got one more episode in this video to talk about, which rounds off my top 6. But this episode, this is, again, a great horror story. So Maxine Alderson, her best stuff in Doctor Who is horror. Although it'd be nice to see her back later down the line as well to maybe tackle either horror again or other stories. I know she does stories out that aren't just horror. But for Doctor Who, she's managed to do mixed sci-fi and horror perfectly. Maybe start out horror, but then go a bit more sci-fi later down the line. And in this story, she perfectly tackles the Weeping Angels. She and Chibnall perfectly tackled the Weeping Angels. After it felt like we learnt too much about the Angels in the Moffat era, after he introduced them really well and really surrounded the mystery and Blink, give him a few more stuff in Series 5, and then in Series 7, they weren't really as effective or scary, and they've just maybe popped up a few other times elsewhere. But here, they're back to being as scary, almost as scary as in Blink, and there's some clever new ideas, stuff there. I'm not a fan of people who are sent back in time once and then are killed instead of being sent back in time again, and they aren't Rory Williams, as Mr. TARDIS put it. Maybe this was something to do with the whole keeping the village in 2 specific time zones, like in Angels Take Manhattan. But unlike that story, some other people here just get sent back in time once, and then next time an angel touches them, I should say, not next time they encounter an angel, but the next one that touches them just kills them, which I wasn't so fond of. But I guess if they can't go back any further and they're not sent across space, then I guess we'll have to deal with that. That was my only kind of issue with the angels in this story, just that bit. It didn't fit with what we learned before, but I guess it has to do with the situation. But yeah, the angels are mainly doing this because they're looking for a rogue angel who's hidden themselves in Claire, who's been sent back in time to the 1960s, and some other temporal extraction stuff to do with the flux or something. I'm not entirely sure. The scary stuff is done really well, and the idea of a rogue angel is pretty cool. Hiding in Claire to hide from Division, as it used to work for them, and the Division has sent these other angels to get it, and then makes a deal with them to give the Doctor over instead, although the angel, it turns out, not to escape anyway. So they probably extract it from Claire and incarcerate or something. But yeah, it's interesting. We also got a bit of Belle's story that includes ther, so that expands on her stuff, which is probably the least interesting part of the episode. But after knowing what her deal is, it's interesting to see what she's up to. But yeah, most of this episode is basically on the angels, the Doctor. Kevin McNally debuts as the Professor. Jericho, Eustachius Jericho, he's amazing. He's my 4th favourite character. No, sorry, Carvanista, and I have to drop you down a bit. Actually, I take it back. Dan and Carvanista are my 3rd and 4th favourite characters of the era. Jericho's my 2nd favourite, after Graham. And yeah, he's just absolutely fantastic. I love this guy. Initially, you might think he's kind of like a bit of a skeptical guy. Maybe he'd be grumpy with the Doctor. But no, he's actually quite open. He's quite nice. And he's on board really quickly, mainly due to experiences in his past. So he's pretty much on board helping the Doctor and Claire as much as he can. And he becomes a main character for the second half of the series. Honestly, I'd say he's a companion. Mainly because he sticks around with the other 2 companions for the other half of the series, even if he doesn't travel in the TARDIS that much. Okay, so the ending of this episode is probably one of the best cliffhangers of this era, and probably the best cliffhanger of the series is at the end of this one, where the angels encase the Doctor in stone to be taken back to Division, and nobody can do a feck about it. Jericho is sent back in time, and the companions watch in horror as the Doctor is turned to stone, and nobody can do a thing about it. And that leaves us to next episode, Survivors of the Flux, which might, whilst I think I put Once Upon a Time as the weakest episode subjectively, I think this one might be the objectively weakest episode, because despite being 6 episodes and what may have been part 1 of a 2-parter finale initially, it ends, if any of these plans were brought over from the original Series 13 plans, I would love Big Finish to do a Lost Season 39, Lost Series 13, like they did with the Lost Season 23 and the Lost Season 27 on audio, once they get the license to do the 13th Doctor audios and the cast decide they're ready to come back and do them, etc. It'll be several years, maybe decades into the future, but I'd love Big Finish to tackle the Lost Series 13, if any. I know some scripts were at least pitched, because I know Ed Heim and Maxine Alderton were on board to write, and only Alderton carried over, and maybe there was probably some other writers drafted in or planned to be drafted. So it would have been nice if Big Finish tackled the Lost Series 13 at some point in the next couple of decades. And to me, this episode feels like it would have been, or part of it would have been, the first half of the 2-part finale. Maybe some elements from previous episodes, but mostly part 1 of the 2-part finale. Episode 9, if you will. but it's pushed back to V5, and it's part 5 as a 6-part story, but it's still part 1 of the 2-part finale. And it's mostly set up for that. Again, a bit like Essential Assignment, but half of it is, about a third of it is dedicated, I should say, to the origins of the unit, which I don't think were that needed. Not here, not yet. Anyway, maybe another episode standalone. And the Grand Serpent's involved, and he's basically only here so that he can have the unit disbanded again, which is why it's not there in Resolution, so that the Sontarans can invade again. Great. Yeah, worth a third of the episode for that. Actually, it might even be a quarter, because we also got Ben and Carbonista and Vinder and Swarm and Azure doing stuff as well. But the main other arcs are the Doctor meeting Tech Daemon, played by Barbara Flynn in this series, and not really learning anything else about Division apart from that they're in the space between universes, and they're trying to go to another universe whilst the Flux destroys this one. Okay, that's all well and good. But as far as the Division stuff is concerned, feck all. Meanwhile, Yaz, Dan, and Jericho have to cross the world to try and find answers about the Flux and eventually find the Williamson Caves. By the way, Joseph Williamson has popped up a couple times in this series for no reason. And he basically pops up again and helps them. But the Sontarans invade. Yeah, this episode is basically just set up for next episode and maybe moving chess pieces around. It doesn't really give us much answers. Mostly only the stuff about the Flux itself. And yeah, it's not really much else. Honestly, more of it's more focused on the companions globe hopping, because we did a globe hopping episode this series, and the origins of unit. But stuff we actually care about, like the Division, the answers, kind of just not really done. Just buzzwords like the Division is big or unimaginable, or something along those lines. Yeah, you can tell Chibnall's sticking to his guns about keeping very secretive about this. You know, there's a difference between mystery that the audience can theorize about, and then there's just introducing something and then making it a mystery just for the sake of it. I'm going to turn the light on quickly, so I'll be right back. Yeah, it was getting a bit dark. The final episode of the series is The Vanquishers. And whilst this is definitely the strongest of the 3 Whittaker era finales, it's not that great. It ends the series on an okay note, but it doesn't feel like the stories earlier on were building up to a great finale. It just ends up being good. The Sontarans being obsessed with chocolate was funny at the time, but now hasn't aged very well. It's now seen very silly. Although their plan is quite good and their invasion tactics and how they're dealt with is pretty good. It's just the whole chocolate stuff is a bit silly on reflection, and time hasn't aged well with it. That joke, a bit like the conversation joke from Resolution. Yeah, some of Chibnall's humour doesn't quite land, at least in retrospect. Some people would say on first broadcast, or even conception. But Vanquish does have some decent stuff going for it. For starters, there's more stuff happening that's relevant to the Flux arc than the survivors of the Flux. And whilst it doesn't really tie into the Division stuff, that may have been the original plan before the Centenary special was greenlit, but it does at least wrap up the Flux stuff decently. I mean, it could have been better, and the stuff earlier on that was being set up earlier on could have been handled better, but it does handle it well. It's okay, it's decent, enjoyable, but it does leave a couple of loose threads hanging, and with still that overarching mystery. But like I said last video, I think Chibnall's sticking to his guns unless he introduces a big surprise in the Centenary. So yeah, we'll just have to see about that. But yeah, also Kate Stewart's wasted. Remember when I was saying Captain Jack was just brought back to do Feckle for Fugitive of the Jadoon before actually doing stuff in Revolution of the Daleks? It was kind of a setup for that. Well, this time Kate Stewart's brought in for 2 episodes and doesn't really do that much. The Grand Serpent's after her for some reason, but yeah, I don't know. Maybe she'll do more in the Centenary. I'm hoping that she's going to be better utilised there, but in these 2 episodes at least, she's not very well utilised. The last episode kind of explained why Unit was off the grid for now, and it's going to come back properly in the Centenary, but yeah, she just was very underutilised here. Well, at least Unit's coming back in the Centenary. Yay! But yeah, there's not really much more to say about this episode I haven't already covered. I only covered this episode just under a year ago, so the series isn't even a year old yet. Halloween hasn't even come yet, so it's 7th of October at time of recording these first 4 videos, parts 0 to 3, and this series isn't even a year old yet. It's going to be a year old in like 3 weeks from 2 days' time on Halloween. So yeah, and the Vanquishers is 5 weeks younger than that. So yeah, just like with the Revolution of the Daleks revisitation review coming in only about 4 months after the episode aired, well, 4.5. This reflection is only coming less than a year after this series airs, and like almost 6 months after the last episode at time of recording Legend of the Sea Devils has aired. So the Vanquishers, yeah, it was fun, but it could have been better. Definitely the stronger of the 3 Whittaker era series finales, and I even take it above Wedding of River Song and Dark Waters Heaven Heaven, and especially Hellbent. I take all of them above Hellbent. But I can't deny this one could have been even better, and yeah, it misses out on being top quality series finale like the RTD quadology and Moffat's first and last finales, series 5 and 10 to be precise. But it's better than, and also Name of the Doctor I put above this one. I suppose it's midway on my new series finales ranking, or midway but going on bottom half. So as a story overall, Flux actually isn't that great of a story. It's a good series of 6 episodes, each telling their own parts of the story. Well, okay, 3 I'm not so worried about, and 5 isn't handled that well. 1 sets up stuff well enough, but not brilliantly, and then stuff that later on kind of makes it look a bit worse in retrospective, and 6, again, same on the conclusions. But 2 and 4 are amazing. So, as a series 13 is good. I think I probably would say series 11 is better on a structural level, but that's mainly if I was saying as looking at series 13 as a one story. As a series of episodes linking with each other, I think it's a okay series. I think it's good, but I think the way it was, the story was told over 6 parts could have been handled better. Even if there was 2 really brilliant episodes in there as part of this 6-part adventure, but the other ones needed a bit more work. So I think I would put Series 11 above Series 13, mainly because Series 13's structure as one story over 6 episodes could have been better, especially Episode 5. And as a story, again, could have been better structured over the series. 1 could have been more than just the setup. 5 definitely needed to be more than setup for the last episode. And whilst 3 kind of does some decent stuff, it feels like it's kind of just random all of a sudden, but interesting randomness. And 6 could have had a bit more of a satisfactory conclusion, even if it's a more enjoyable one than the previous ones, and actually a bit more of a cohesive and actually well executed one than the previous 2. So yeah, it's at least a couple steps up from Brand School Av Collars and Timeless Children. So but yeah, but Series 13, it's good. I'm good, but I'm still going to say Series 11 is the best Whittaker era series so far. Right, so I don't have much battery time left, so let's quickly cover the 2 specials that followed Series 13. The first of the 3 2022 specials. Firstly, Eve of the Daleks, the 2022 New Year special, and I'm going to agree with Mr. TARDIS. The specials that follow the series are better finales than the actual finales, as Eve of the Daleks is my sixth favourite story of the 13th Doctor's era. This is a great story. It uses the time travel, time loop story to a really great advantage. It's got two pretty fun supporting characters, one played by Aisling B, who's great, and another one is called Nick, which is personally quite nice. And the Daleks are at their best. Again, this era really does treat the Daleks really well. It treats most of the returning monsters really well. But yeah, this is a great special, using the time loop effectively, that plot, and using the one location really well. I like how this is basically a budget saving episode, and Chibnall only had a week or two to write this one, but yet it works so well. Definitely more than Rantical Out Collars, which was just the first draft. This one, I don't know if it was the first draft or not, but it certainly works well in that confined time. Yeah, it's basically copy and paste with a few changes, but that's time loop stories for you. But yeah, it's a pretty good one and a pretty effective one. Some great Dalek attacks, great Dalek moments. Really enjoyed it. Had some great times, and a pretty nice New Year special, and a good epilogue to the Flux arc, in a way. We're probably going to see more of that later down the line in the Centenary special, but for here, it works pretty effectively. This is basically Flux Chapter 7, basically, unofficially. It's a good epilogue to this series. And I think that's the new series, that's the New Year specials in a nutshell, epilogues to their respective series. And they work better as finales, though. But yeah, Eve of the Daleks, a really fun and enjoyable episode. It may not be for everybody. I know Harper Holmes puts this and Legend of the Sea Devils as two worst specials on his specials tier ranking. But I completely disagree. This episode is brilliant, in my opinion. One of my favourites of the 13th Doctor's era. One of my favourite New Year specials. Probably my favourite New Year special, actually. And favourite New Year episode. And yeah. And one of my favourite Dalek stories. I mean, it's no Bad Wolf Parting of the Ways or Remembrance of the Daleks, but it's up there. Or Genesis of the Daleks, but it's up there. So it's like around the Chase area, basically. Chase, Eve of the Daleks, Stolen of Jenny's End area. So, yeah. Okay, the last special, Legend of the Sea Devils, the latest episode to air at time of recording, but soon we'll be having a brand new episode. So, but until then, until that airs, this is the latest episode at time of recording, and because this video is going to come out before the Centennial special, hopefully, if I get this edited in time, it's the latest one until that episode broadcasts. So, latest episode, Legend of the Sea Devils. What went wrong? Seriously, what went wrong? This. I was super hyped for this episode. I was ecstatic to see the return of the Sea Devils, who were introduced in the Third Doctor's era. I was hyped to see them back. I was looking forward to this Easter special. Bit disappointed to know it's going to be 50 minutes. Not even 50 minutes, but it's around 50 minutes. Okay, that is weird. Specials are usually 60 minutes or longer. This is actually shorter than some of the regular episodes, even in this era. So there's only like 2 shorter in this era, and and some of the other RTD and Moffat era episodes that are 50 minutes or longer. It's shorter than those, and it's a special. Why is it not 60 minutes? I theorise maybe because this was going to be the Regeneration episode before the Centenary was greenlit, so under the 10 minutes of that was cut so that they could transfer that to the next episode. But this also means that there's a lot from the episode cut. That's just to make the 50-minute mark. Maybe it was maybe the BBC wanted it 50 minutes instead of 60. But it's a special. It's got to be 60 or more, surely. So I don't know what the decision was to make it 50, unless it was to cut out the regeneration stuff. This then makes the episode cut a lot of stuff out. There's a lot of fast-paced cutting. And the climax kind of comes as a bit of an out of nowhere. It's like random. Heck, it's copying the Timeless Children bit where this one guy comes in to help the Doctor and takes the sacrifice for her, which might even have been how 13 dies. But this other guy comes in to do it. And even though we get some nice slow calm moments at the end with Dan and Diane, his girlfriend from series 13, and the Doctor and Yaz. By the way, these two specials are where they really take up the Doctor Yaz romantic relationship. Fans who are predicting up to 11. They basically make as Mr. TARDIS says, he makes the subtext the text, especially with the subtext being very clear throughout series 13 and parts of 12. And this is probably some of the better stuff, the Phasmin stuff in this episode. It was good in either the Daleks, but this one it's really good. That's probably the strongest angle of this, and the fact that Sea Devil designs do respect the classic ones whilst updating them for the modern audience, even though it might have been good to actually have the mouths move when they're speaking. They managed it for Jadoon. They could do it for Sea Devils. So, yeah, it's either... I think maybe they could have done makeup for the face and then the back of the heads. But, oh well, at least Craig Elms does a good vocal performance as the Sea Devil leader. But, yeah, this is a bit of a... This story feels like there's been a lot of stuff cut. It also feels like it was a rushed story. I mean, Chip said he wrote Eve in 2 weeks. This one feels like it was written in 1 week or less. This feels like a first draft. And like Ryan Squav Carlos, I'm not going to have a go at Ella Rose because this is one of her earlier writing credits, especially for big budget television or medium budget television, mainstream. We'll go with mainstream television. I'm not going to have a huge go at her, especially as half the blame goes with Chipnell as well. It just feels like something was missing, both in the writing department and the editing department. And I would love to know what went on behind the scenes making this episode. I know COVID was a big factor, but come on, guys. The other 7 episodes made, and well, I can't say for the Centennial special, but the other 7 episodes at least were a bit more cohesive. Even the weaker ones, like Survivors, although that was mainly on a plot level, but. Yeah, even the other 7 episodes could be a bit more cohesive. This one, come on, what was going on here? I don't know what went wrong. It's definitely something on the editing side, at least. Maybe script as well, but it definitely felt like a very lackluster story. For what was supposed to be an exciting Chinese pirate versus Sea Devil adventure, it was quite lackluster, and Madam Ching is easily the weakest historical figure character of the Whittaker era. There's very little to her backstory, only that her crew, including her 2 young children, were kidnapped and she needs to get money to pay their ransom. Okay. That could be anybody, though. That's what makes her specifically important, apart from being one of the few female pirates at the time and Chinese. I'm glad they got a Chinese director to make this episode, and I'm not going to have too much of a bash at her. I don't know what was going on with her and the production team making this episode. Maybe if it was another 10 to 12 minutes, making it 60 minutes, it probably would be a bit more ironed out, fleshed out, and damn right better. But as it is a complete, utter mess, a massive disappointment, underwhelming, and the weakest of the historical stories, the weakest special in both cases of this era, and probably my least favourite Sea Devil story. Even more, well, okay, no, Warriors of the Deep exists. And I don't hate that one as much as other people, but this one's better than that by a bit. But, it's not going to top the Sea Devils, which is a shame because it could have topped the Sea Devils, but it didn't. It's a massive disappointment for everybody who's looking forward to seeing the Sea Devils come back at some point and eventually got our wish. It was an absolute shipwreck. Not a train wreck, a shipwreck. Also, what was that giant monster creature thing? That was never resolved. Another thing that was cut. Oh well. Yeah. I hope this one gets some target novelization at some point so we can expand on some elements of this. But as it's there, or an extended version of the episode, one that maybe the episode got cut for broadcast. Maybe there's an extended version out there. I doubt that would ever be released if there was, and unless it's a super mega series box set later down the line. Oh well, this is what we got, and it's disappointing. Great. So that's series 13 and the first 2 of the series 13 specials. Like I said, I'll covered the Centenary Special in its own video after its broadcast, as well as several other videos reacting to or reviewing it. But in the case of this video series, it will be an on reflection type of thing. But yeah, overall, like I said, Series 13 is good, but I think it needed to structure its story a bit better. And because I don't think it was that greatly structured, Series 11 is my preferred 13th Doctor series overall, though I did enjoy Series 13, Flux, quite a bit, but mostly the second and fourth episodes. As for the specials, out of the first two, Eve is brilliant, Legend is a massive letdown. Can the power of the Doctor turn things around and put the balance back in the yay episode's favour, or is it doomed to be one of the nay episodes? We'll find out next time with part 4, The Power of the Doctor, and how it affects the 13th Doctor era as a whole, before moving on to, if I decide to do it, Doctor Who Redacted, and then looking at the era overall. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you guys next time. Goodbye. Don't forget to click below to subscribe to the Nicholas Payne YouTube channel. And with bar a few other stories that are exceptions, and also Witchfinder's ending being the exception to this rule. But yeah, created by implied to be created by or working. Making this series officially 6 hours, as opposed to like 5 hours 10, because they're all, as opposed to just all being 50-minute episodes, or maybe 5 50 minutes and 160, which would be 3 would be 2.5, so yeah, 5 hours, but with the extra 25 minutes. Yeah, 25. Meaning this series is longer than the Daleks. So, yeah, that and also the Swarm and Azure are pretty decent villain. But unlike Rory Williams, where one angel escapes and sends it back in time again. But, you know, the angels are trying to. But the whole scary. Yeah. Chibnall. But overall, Sorry, how long that gap was. Yeah. But I suppose it's midway on my new series season finale. stop burping. On a subjective and objective level, as a series of stories linking to each other, especially objectively number 5, and actually I think 3. Actually, you know what, 3 I would put with 1 and 6. Even if I put it as my least favourite, maybe that will change later on as well. By the way, but even if I put it as my least favourite, I'd probably put it with the same camp as 1 and 6. And 5 really, really needed a lot more work. And yeah, but you know, Samuel Davis, the other Samuel, doesn't like. It's not Samuel Davis. It's Harborough Holmes. Sorry. Okay, the last special, and I better be quick about this because of battery life. And until the new episode out, latest time. And I think that's the way it has been handled means that series, and because of that series, though I did enjoy the Flux 13 a bit more, can how the Doctor turn things around and make this a better, one not so